Yeah, 100%. There's no way that you could pass this exam just by saying, okay, you know what, I'm gonna know how to use my calculator better. I'm gonna be really comfortable with the references. That's not gonna work. You have to like get into the details of the concepts. You have to understand the concepts. Nothing's gonna save you. You have to work very hard. I put in more effort, and I easily got it done the second time. I guess the combination of building off my first failure and also the added fuel and pressure, I suppose I took that in a productive way and had it helped me. Yeah,
So, like others have gone through the process. Why is it, Andrew, that you are taking,
exactly.
so long?
I know. I have multiple uncles that are PEs. When I was studying, I didn't look at it like the first time I said, okay, if I fail this, maybe I'll go in this other venture, do this. And then I realized, like, okay, there's no plan B. Like, I must pass this and become a PE.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Wasim.
How's it going?
Good, good. How about you?
I'm doing very well. So, Andrew, you just mentioned that you got your PE license a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, if you look on your previous videos about a year ago, you'll see that I had an interview like this with the FE. Now we passed the PE probably about 6 months after that interview, and I just got my license, and I've
Yeah,
actually already signed plans, and it's
that's
looking pretty
great.
great. Yeah,
You got to work right away, right? That's
yeah,
impressive. I
yeah,
have students who, when they get their P license and they have to stamp and sign plans and drawings, specifications for the first time, they're always a little bit shaky. They're like, oh, you know what, this is a big day for me. I'm going to be signing off on the first document and whatnot. In your case, you have had some great mentorship, right? You mentioned that within your family, your uncles and, other folks um, are already engineers, PEs. So that is obviously a great help. Yeah. So yeah, the first interview that you did for me, I feel electrical. That was I based on what I can tell, student, who viewers found it really helpful. Um, you were in a multiple attempt scenario in FE Electrical, used my program, came across it, utilized it, and got the job done. And right away, you started your P power preparation. So I would like you to walk me through your P Power exam preparation journey.
for the FE, when I failed it, then I took your course to study for the FE. What I did was go through the on demand, go through the live training, do the practice exams, do the quizzes. So I essentially completed your FE course and then I passed. So I said, you know what? I'm going to follow the same formula for the PE. And that's pretty much what I did. I started by going through the on demand and taking the practice exams as I go along the on demand. Then I went to the live training, completed that, and where I felt I was weak, I was going and reviewing that. And this by now was a lot of work. Like I had put in quite a good amount of hours to get to this point, and I was essentially ready for the test. And then in addition to that, after that, I probably spent an additional 10 hours, 20 hours going through other practice exams just so I could see how uh, people ask questions, because one of my struggles was, what are they even asking? That's what I was that was like, their questions are a little bit confusing, so to me, like the way they ask it, it's not, they don't directly ask you like, find X. They convolute it, and getting these curveballs as when we would prepare me like my exam, and me and you, we have an email thread of about 100 plus emails of strategy, me asking you questions, you giving me advice. And one of the things that you said is they throw these curveballs. So I would get the fastballs, they would throw the straight ones. The curveballs were messing me up. So seeing different flavors of how they ask things um, really helped me. And I honestly, I hate to kind of boast, but it's just my honest assessment. I think when I took the exam, I felt like I got like nearly every single question right. Like I knew I had passed when I took it. Like I I'm pretty sure about like 75% way through the exam, I was trying to contain laughter because I knew like I for sure potentially have like the highest score of everybody taking this exam. Like that's just my analysis on
On your second attempt. On your second attempt, obviously. Yeah.
yeah, I got
Right. Yeah, that's really impressive, Andrew. And as we go through the live training in the on-demand course, and when you look at the NCS sample exam, you find that exactly as you said, understanding the concept, understanding the question itself can be challenging. Now, some students. So I also want to add a comment that you did not hold yourself back from learning the concepts inside out. So the 100 email chain that you mentioned, right? You were asking questions from my study guide, right? Different approaches that you had taken to solve different homework assignment problems, different quizzes. And there was no holding back on your end when it came to learning and deep diving into the concepts. So one thing that I tell my students in the FE exam preparation and when it comes to the P power exam preparation, but in the FE, the biggest challenge is what? Time, correct? 3 minutes per question. It's really, really time constrained. Do you agree?
yeah,
I think if not the biggest, then one of the biggest challenges.
it's a challenge for sure. Also, some they have some really like the computer sections there.
Yeah, if you're not comfortable with some of the section or if you don't have taken some of the coursework, then obviously it can be difficult. But an overarching theme in the FE is that you are in a race against time.
Exactly.
So when it comes to FE, and I'm going to quickly circle back to P power exam preparation, some students feel like, okay, you know what? I'm going to pick up my calculator, learn the calculator inside out. I'm going to make sure that I understand the reference handbook inside out. And that is going to be my insurance on the exam against time constraint, which I would say is accurate maybe up to 50%, 60%, but the real speed proficiency that you gain is by understanding the conceptual side of things inside out. Because if you can understand what is being asked and if your mind can start spinning in the right direction, right, that is going to save you more time than being a pro at a calculator or having memorized the reference handbook inside out. And that same reasoning continues to P power, because in P power, all of a sudden you have a lot of time. Time is not an issue. 8-hour exam, 80 questions versus 110 questions. Then students again sometimes fall into the trap that, okay, you know what? I need to actually think about uh, ways in which I can deal with the questions much more easily. But they're not necessarily even going to ask you straightforward questions. NCA sample exam is the best example for that. In fact, if you look at any high quality textbook for power systems engineering, any high quality textbook, whether you're talking about Wilde, Chapman, Granger, or even if you're looking at some standards, IEEE standards, you actually have to have very strong reading comprehension. Okay, where you have to absorb one paragraph of content in order to thoroughly understand that particular scenario, because it's not just like v is equal to ir, I give you I and r, you calculate v. Because in something as complicated as power system network, which actually some I read somewhere, it is the most fascinating creation by human beings. I know electrical engineers don't get that much attention and whatnot. Electricity is taken for granted. But if you think about a single entity that humans have created, a network that humans have created, it actually is far more complicated than anything else, even more than telecommunication, because power systems grid is very interconnected. Like the entire continent of North America, for to an extent, is all interconnected. Same can be said for Europe, same can be said for Asia, same can be said for South America, right? Australasia, and so on. So if you look at it as a single entity, it is very comprehensive. So coming back to your comment, understanding the concept, right? And if your conceptual understanding is sound, that is the best insurance you have against convoluted questions. And as much as you look you went through different practice exams and all of that, and got accustomed to different style of questions. I think that, in my opinion, the underlying theme is still the fact that you digged deep into the concepts.
Yeah, 100%. There's no way that you could pass the exam just by saying, okay, you know what, I'm gonna know how to use my calculator better. I'm gonna be really comfortable with the references. That's not gonna work. You have to like get into the details of the concepts. You have to understand the concepts. Nothing's gonna save you. You have to work very hard to uh, to pass it. That's my approach. Is you have to go through it understanding everything and put in the hard work.
For sure. So how did you bounce back from the first failed attempt, and then you got to a stage, where you, in the exam, you're like 75%, more than 75%, hands down, I've got it done. And
Yeah.
then you actually found the second attempt a lot easier. So how did you first recover from the failure, and then got back to the task of preparing for the exam, and got to a level where you had comfortably passed the exam? So more on the mindset side of things, if you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, I guess on my first attempt, I was maybe a little bit arrogant from passing the FE. I was like, oh man, I passed the FE. I'm gonna just beat this like for sure, like whatever. And there was a couple concepts like some faults, like unsymmetrical faults or and symmetrical faults. I said, you know what, whatever. I'll maybe just get like one like three of these. Hopefully, I'll get like one right. I'll be good. And it was stupid. And then what ended up happening is I failed. I was close. I failed, in my opinion, a pretty close failure. I was probably a few questions away. Don't get me wrong. I worked hard, not as hard as I could, but I maybe put like 90% effort instead of 100.
Right.
I failed, and I'll be honest. I was pretty disappointed and like I was like, everything comes into play. You get like anxious, you get frustrated, your back's against the wall. It's like, okay, if I fail this second attempt, and then it's like I failed. What then? I have to make sure I pass the third attempt, or I got to do a couple hoops or whatever to take it again. So I was pretty like I was really focused. I was like for sure like mentally like discouraged and I guess anxious, but maybe that's what fueled me to study even harder. And I put in more effort, and I easily got it done the second time. I guess the combination of building off my first failure and also the added fuel and pressure, I suppose I took that in a productive way and had it helped me.
And what was the gap between your first and second attempt?
It wasn't long. It was like I want to say 4 months, three,
Four
because I
months.
had to wait about 3 months because of the time window.
The window. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I was gonna take it, but then I rescheduled it because I was so like
Still, I
anxious.
think I pushed it out by a couple of weeks or something. I
I
remember
pushed it
you saying.
multiple times. As a matter of fact, I'm in Florida. I made an appointment in North Carolina. I
Oh,
bought a
okay.
hotel and the airplane ticket, and I canceled it. And I like
Oh, wow.
lost like a couple bucks off that. I don't care, but I lost a couple dollars doing that, but it was worth it. Then I rescheduled it and got super prepared. I got super like I
That's
wanted
great.
to be bulletproof.
That's great. And I think at the back of our minds, especially, I know that you have family, kids. So what ends up happening is that you also feel like you haven't only let yourself down, but you have
Yeah,
actually let your
100%. Yeah.
family down, because now they have to put the brakes on social commitments, and you're not there for your kids, and all of that. So that is sort of an additional built on pressure, correct?
Yeah, 100%. Especially from the culture I come from, my parents are very very strict. Like, they if I have a very strict parents, and like, if you don't uh perform, you're gonna be like it's a bad look on them. So
Yeah. And you have your uncle is an engineer PE, right?
yeah, yeah,
So like others have gone through the process. Why is it, Andrew, that you are taking,
exactly.
so long?
I know. I have multiple uncles that are PEs.
Right. Right. But that's great, what you pulled off, and you stayed on course. your commitment was unwavering, right?
Yeah.
You knew very clearly that you have to get this done. You utilize the content for both FE electrical exam preparation and P power exam preparation, and you gave it your 100% and got the result. So many congratulations, Andrew.
Thank you.
I know good things wait for you in the future, and I wish you best of luck.
Thank you. I want to say one last thing to build on my last comment.
Sure.
When I was studying, I didn't look at it like the first time I said, okay, if I fail this, maybe I'll go in this other venture, do this. And then I realized like, okay, there's no plan B. Like I must pass this and become a PE. Like this is my bread and butter. I must do it. And that mindset of like, there's no other option. I have to do this. Otherwise I'm going to struggle was what really fueled me, with plus the nerves and the anxiety of, and that helped. But also you have to have the right content, and I give credit to Wasim and your course, and that really was what separated me, and what I would recommend it to every single one of my peers saying I want to be a PE, I want to do PE. I would say you have to take Wasim's course, otherwise good luck to you. You'll probably be in a multi-fail situation unless you're like Albert Einstein or something.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Andrew. And you should not discount the level of effort that you put in, right? Anybody who puts in that time and effort, I'm confident that, okay, yeah, hopefully the course helped you, but when there is that strong will to succeed, you will figure out a way. So again, many congratulations, and look forward to staying in touch with you.
Awesome. Same here. Thank you so much, Wasim.
Thanks. If you like this video, then please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comment section of this video below. You can find tons of success stories of my FE Electrical and PE Power students over here. And if you want to learn more about preparation of FE Electrical and Computer exam and the PE Power exam, then check out these playlists over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.